Welcome back, everyone. I'm happy to also welcome back to court licensed professional mental health counselor and former ordained minister, Candace Gorham. Candace is the author of The Ebony Exodus Project, Why Some Black Women Are Walking Out on Religion and Others Should Too. Her most recent book is entitled On Death, Dying, and Disbelief. Today, Ms. Gorham will be recounting her personal and professional experiences with grief and loss, sharing concrete actions secular mourners can take to help them process their grief. Welcome back to the Conference on Religious Trauma, Candace. Thanks for joining us again.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. All right, so I'm going to just jump straight in. Let's see. Let me pull up my slide. All right. So as Janice was saying, this is my second year with the conference, and I'm so excited. I'm very honored to be back. Last year I spoke on, the last time I spoke on the Ebony Exodus Project and issues facing, the African American community. But since then, I have I've been writing and talking more about death and dying, because that's, as we know, everybody's got to experience that. And that's a big, that is often considered to be like a spiritual thing when we're talking about death and dying and the afterlife and all of these things. That is often considered to be sort of like in the realm of the supernatural. And so I felt like we as the non-believing community needed something for us to help with these mourning processing. And so this is what this is about. My thing is acting funny, y'all. Of course it is. All right. So a little bit about me. My religious background, I was raised a Jehovah's Witness for a number of years. My parents separated and divorced when I was really young. So my mom didn't make me go to the Kingdom Hall anymore. But in middle school, I started going to the Methodist church, which was like my dad's, like the family church, like where my father grew up, and grandma and all the aunts and uncles, because everybody went to that Methodist church. And so in about like middle school, I got confirmed in the Methodist church, and I did that for a number of years. And then I got to high school, and I got a high school boyfriend, and I got a job, and I got a car, and I got all those things. And so I stopped going to church. But eventually, my sister married a minister my senior year in high school. And so I ended up getting back into religion and getting back into Christianity very seriously. And that's where I became ordained as an evangelist, a prophetess, as I was out preaching on the streets and, knocking on doors. And, I was in the choir and the praise team and did all that stuff, speaking in tongues, did all that stuff. And so for me, becoming an atheist, becoming a non-believer was an intellectual process. I was very serious about my religious beliefs. And so it took a long time for me to come out of that. Here's some other things. I'm also a member of the Secular Therapist Project, the Clergy Project. I know Daryl Ray was on earlier in the conference, so he may have mentioned some of these things. I know Dan Barker was on. He may have also mentioned the Clergy Project. And I'm also on the American Humanist Association Board, and a member of the Secular Student Alliance Speakers Bureau. So again, as I was saying at the beginning, why this book? Why now? What there was the initial impetus was that my high school sweetheart died in 2019, and it was a devastating loss, to say the least. We were high school sweethearts. You go your separate ways for a little while. We both got married and had our own lives, and then we both got divorced, and we reunited and reconnected, and we had reconnected. And so his death in 2019 was it was a devastation. And so coming up on the 1 year anniversary, I thought I was doing good. I was feeling, it's been a year since he died. I'm feeling good. I thought I was. And then that 1 year anniversary, that first anniversary comes up and it just hits you like a ton of bricks. And I thought I cannot have another 6 months like that first 6 months. I can't do this again. How can I not go through this again? And so I thought I got to channel this some kind of way. And that's why that's how the idea of the book came up, was what are the things that I've sort of told myself, and what are the ways that I kind of helped myself over the past year? And I said, as I said there, I was also supporting some friends who were grieving as well. So what are some of the things that I've been saying to my friends? How my friends and I, how have we been supporting each other? And then also part of the reason behind the book, and part of the, some of the material that's in the book just comes from questions, comments, concerns, and other things like that people have expressed to me over the years. When I go to conferences, of course, I'm introduced as a licensed mental health counselor. And so, people often have a lot of questions about grief and managing grief and that sort of thing. So some of what all came out of the book was just sort of a natural outgrowth of personal experience and professional experience. So in the book on Death, Dying, Disbelief, it is a very short book. It's like 120 pages, but and I really wanted to get like straight to the point. Like I wanted you to be able to open that book, just put your finger on any page and immediately be able to find something, some concrete thing that you can do today to hopefully help yourself start to feel better. And so it's a very fast read. And as you can see here, these are the 10 tips, and they go straight to the point. So and I'm going to do this for those of you who hate this. Somebody reminded me maybe a few talks ago. I often have the habit of reading a lot of the material on the screen, and a lot of people complain about that. But somebody who was sight impaired came on and was like, "Thank you for doing that. Not everybody can read everything that's on the screen." So that kind of made me feel like, okay, thank you, because I read everything on the screen. And so I want to read these. So these are the 10 tips real quick. I'm going to go through them real quick. Tip number 1 says, yes, you can grieve without there being a deeper supernatural meaning. Tip 2, be patient with your spiritual loved ones. 3, take care of your physical self. Take care of you. 4, attend to your psychological and emotional needs. 5, there is no time limit on grief. Be patient with yourself. 6, reconnect with nature. 7, postpone major decisions. 8, do something in their honor. 9, cry, and then cry some more. And then tip number 10 is about caring for others who are grieving. So tip number 10 is more geared towards somebody who's not in mourning, but I got a friend who's in mourning, or a loved one or something like that who is in mourning. The book, if you're familiar with Kubler-Ross, you know that long time ago, she wrote a book called On Death and Dying, hence the name of my book, On Death, Dying, and Disbelief. And this is where Kubler-Ross is the person who is behind this concept of the 5 stages of grief that we often hear about and talk about, and it's in our sort of pop culture consciousness now, the idea of these 5 stages of grief. They are so often misunderstood that Kubler-Ross came back years later, like in the either the late 90s or the early 2000s, and she wrote another book to say, like, guys, you guys have been misunderstanding my 5 stages for so long. Let me re-explain what I'm saying. And so these are the stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. We often think that they go in a order, but they don't. They don't go in a prescribed order. You can go in and out of any of these stages, even within minutes. And then we often think of acceptance as an end goal, like you get to acceptance, but you don't get to acceptance. Acceptance is a process. I like to give an example of a personal experience I remember having when I was really in my grief. I don't remember what it was that I was thinking about or something, but I remember that I started to feel really sad. And then, so that was some depression, right? That would have been the depression stage. And then, like, within minutes, I was angry because I was like, why am I sad about this? I'm so tired of being sad about this. And so like in minutes, I was angry with myself. And then within a few minutes, it was like, oh, Candace, this is just part of the natural process. And then that was like the acceptance. So like within minutes, I went through like 3 of the stages. And then I stopped and I laughed because I thought, here I am, the counselor who's written this book. And, you know, I had to have this moment of going like, yeah, actually, you know, you say it happens, but to actually be aware of it happening in that moment. I went through all of these things and then I stopped and just like started laughing at myself because I was like, okay, these stages are really extreme. This is ridiculous. So this is a real selfie. I just wanted to share this real selfie, okay, from a funeral. They can last quite a while. Especially the Black ones. I don't know if you've ever been to a Black funeral, but you'll be in there all day. You will starve. Okay, so some of my favorite tips was number 1, yes, you can grieve without there being a deeper supernatural meaning. This one is really important. I thought about it with, especially with my friends. When I said at the beginning, I was supporting a couple of friends who were going through something, who were grieving loved ones as well. And one of them in particular, she was grieving the death of a lover also. And she came to me and she asked me, do I sometimes wish that he was in heaven? And I thought, well, I guess, yeah, I do sometimes wish he's in heaven, but I don't believe in a heaven. So it doesn't really bother me. But for her, she doesn't believe in a heaven, but she so badly wanted her lover to be in heaven that she was kind of became obsessed with this idea of heaven and was like, and it had become sort of like this distressing back and forth thing for her. And so a lot of times we go through these things, right? Sometimes we have these seemingly supernatural experiences. People think they hear their voices of the loved ones after they're dead. Maybe they think that they're hearing things moving around the house. People, you know, obviously you're going to be dreaming a lot about your loved one. And a lot of people believe that, you know, dreams have deeper meanings or that the person is coming to you in your dreams to give you some kind of special message, you know. We live in a highly religious and spiritual society. And so, you know, it just makes sense to me. If you look at my final quote down there at the bottom, it says, it is not unreasonable that you, having encountered that way of thinking much of your life, might manifest some of those same internalized concepts during your time of extreme vulnerability. So again, that's to say if you've been in the United States, I'm an American. I'm not quite sure how significant it is in Canada, but I'm just imagining that much of the Western world, right, has a lot of religion, has a lot of spirituality, has a lot going on. And so even if you just watch TV, if you watch movies and television, this stuff can get into your consciousness without you realizing it. And then, you know, so I want to encourage people to not feel distressed if they find themselves having moments of like thinking something spiritual or wishing that this was true or believing these things for moments. You know, it's okay. Don't freak out. You know, you're going to be okay. Another one of my favorite tips, I might be a little partial. I'm a counselor. So attend to your psychological and emotional needs, right? See a counselor. You may have to consider going to somebody who's a non-believer. A lot of non-believers, atheists, agnostics, humanists, secularists, a lot of us say we don't want a counselor who's a Christian or a Muslim or any kind of religious anything. I don't want a spiritual healer. I don't want nobody who's going to try to touch my chakras. Like, leave me alone. Give me some good old cognitive behavior therapy, please. But sometimes you may have to, now, obviously, I wouldn't encourage you going to go see, you know, something that's not founded in reality. But if you could find you an evidence-based counselor, even if you walk in that counselor's room and they got, you know, a cross on the wall or something, that does not automatically mean that they're not going to be a good counselor. That does not automatically mean that they're not going to be able to put their religious beliefs to the side and be able to support you. And, you know, as an atheist personally, I have to be able to support religious, you know, clients all the time. So that means I have to be able to sit there in that moment and listen to them express their religious beliefs and be able to support them without being judgmental. And so I say that to say that we are trained to be able to do these things, to sit with stuff that we don't agree with and still support a person. And so you may have to give a person a try. And I know a lot of people say they've been through a lot of counselors, they've been through a lot of therapists, and they just kind of give up on trying. And so I encourage you, if you're going through something as severe, if your grief is as deep and as severe and as profound as, mine was, I would suggest some counseling. Or at the very least, see a doctor or psychiatrist. Take some meds. Take your meds, right? I talk about how, I like to explain to my clients, I'm big on medications. I'm very open and transparent about it. I take psychotropic medications. And I'm very big on it. I believe in it wholeheartedly because I know how much it's changed my life. And so I tell people, at least consider it, at least talk to a doctor about it and see, and to think of it as medications are for a cluster of symptoms. So sometimes we hear like, oh, this medication is for depression, or this medication is for anxiety, or this medication is for bipolar disorder. And if the doctor tries to write you a prescription that you've heard was for bipolar, some people will go, oh my God, no, that's for bipolar. That's not me. But really, medications are for clusters of symptoms, right? And so if you're having a certain cluster of symptoms, this medication may be good for that cluster of symptoms. So kind of try to think of it that way. And also keep in mind that if you may just need this medication just to get over the hump, just to get through the really tough period, especially like anxiety medication or something like this. This is not to say you're going to be on this for the rest of your life. This is not to say that this is going to be a permanent thing for you. This may just be something temporary. I remember I have a friend of mine who she had gotten in a car accident and got a concussion. She said she was probably maybe in her 50s when she told me this. She said, I never suffered with depression in my life, Candace, and I got a concussion in this car accident, and all of a sudden I started having depression episodes. I had never had depression my entire life. And so she took her doctor's advice, started taking an antidepressant. She said she took it for a year. She felt better. She went off. She hasn't had to struggle with depression since. But she had to be open to that because, her initial reaction was, I don't have depression. I've never struggled with depression, but it was triggered by a specific thing. You got over the hump. You better. Now you can go back to your baseline. You don't need the medication. So my quote here says, you should let yourself feel as many feelings as you want to feel, but realize that there are actions that you can and should take to make yourself resilient, thereby preventing the emotions from consuming and destroying your life. Number 6. Oh, my favorite. My favorite my favorite tip of them all is reconnect with nature. Anybody who knows me knows I'm an avid hiker. I go to Colorado and hike 14,000 foot mountains. I cruise to, Dominican Republic and I jump waterfalls, and I, crawl in creeks and walk up the creek and find a hidden waterfall somewhere. Like, I am a true outdoorsy girl. Like, don't let this, jewelry and makeup fool you. I am an outdoorsy person, believe me. So that is my thing, is to reconnect with nature. After Apple Picking, if you've never read it, I suggest that you read it. It's by Robert Frost. It's one of my all-time favorite poems. And it is a contemplation on death. But it's so beautiful. It's such a beautiful contemplation on death. And it's because he uses a lot of this imagery of nature and a lot of this, it's the imagery of nature and all of that goes with it that just makes it such a beautiful poem. So one of the things I talk about in the book is directed attention fatigue and attention restoration theory by Stephen Kaplan. And directed attention, as I talk about in the book, it says requires effort, plays a central role in achieving focus, is under voluntary control, at least some of the time, is susceptible to fatigue, and controls distraction through the use of inhibition. So our directed attention, all day long, we're using our directed attention. We're trying to stay focused. We're driving, we're working, we're talking to people, we're eating at the same time that we're checking our text messages and our email. And that directed attention that is helping us stay focused, that's helping us, maintain control, not be distracted, that thing can get tired. It can wear out. And so that's why, according to Kaplan, we can turn to something called soft fascination, which is part of his attention restoration theory. We turn to soft fascination, which is a form of attention that requires no effort and thus allows us to restore our directed attention. So soft fascination, and he talks about how nature is a prime restorative environment. So Kaplan believes that getting outside in any form or fashion, in any way possible, is going to help to, it helps you turn off that directed attention and then just engage, just connect, and just sort of be present. One of the key things about soft fascination is whatever you do, it's got to be something that's easy, doesn't require a lot of effort, doesn't require a lot of thought, just something that you can do easily. So hiking, biking, planting flowers, or vegetable gardens, just sitting on the porch during a rainstorm. Let's say you can't hike a 14,000 foot mountain, no problem. Go sit on your porch during a rainstorm. Let's say, so for example, if you've never, I'll put jet skiing up there because for you, jet skiing might be a restorative thing. I've jet skied before. It terrifies the crap out of me. I would not be relaxed. It would not restore my directed attention. It's fun. I would do it again, but it is not a restorative activity for me because I'm going to be scared blankless the whole, like 90% of the ride. So you need to be doing, and for me, pitching a tent in a forest and then going down to the creek and filtering my water out of the creek, for dinner, that's wonderful for me. For you, you may be like, I can't pitch a tent. Candace, get away from me with this. And so, it's about what is easy for you to do. And there's a lot of research that talks about heart surgery patients and how they recovered from their surgeries much faster. Those who were exposed to even as simple as those who had images of trees and flowers and more images of nature in their room fared better than those who didn't. Those who had windows that faced trees outdoors fared better than the heart surgery patients whose windows just face like the side of another building. So there's a lot of research that talks about how good even just being exposed to imagery of nature can be for our physical health. Okay, so tip number 10. Again, like I said, I like this one because this sort of speaks to those who are supporting the grieving person, right? These are really practical. This section is so practical, it may be boring, right? It's like, be patient with them. Send notes of encouragement and condolences. I'm going to tell you, I am a big fan of going to the store, getting a real paper card, signing it with a pen and pencil, putting an actual stamp on it. Like, I'm a big proponent of that. And every time I've ever sent somebody a card who was in mourning, I would get a personal phone call in tears, like, oh my gosh, this really touched me. I haven't gotten a real card in the mail in I don't know how long, and so those are really touching. And I had a friend of mine who for almost a year, she sent me a card. The first 3 months, I probably got a card from her every month. And then I got a card from her for Christmas. I got a card from her for his birthday. I got a card from her for the 1 year anniversary. Like, she was just constantly sending me cards over the course of the year as she was sort of marking my grieving process with me. Things like cooking meals. Something that you may not think about is small portion and disposable dishes. I remember I tell the story in the book about how a friend of mine brought me like a quart of some homemade vegetable soup that she made. Oh, it was so good. But I was so sickly and so distraught that I was barely eating. I mean, I lost a lot of weight. If you saw pictures of me in like summer and fall 2019, you would say somebody needed to rush me to the hospital. Like I was visibly ill. And I talk about it in the book how I actually did need medical treatment multiple times because I was that depressed and not taking care of myself. And one of the things I tell this story about how my friend brought me this big quart of soup and it was so delicious, but I didn't eat it. I ate like half of a cup's worth. And then it sat in the back of the refrigerator and it molded in the back of the refrigerator. And I ended up throwing the soup and the whole carton and everything away, the carton and everything. And so my advice to people who are like cooking for their loved ones is one, cook in small portions because they may not want to eat that much. And then also take disposable dishes because the last thing I want is more dishes piling up that I got to wash and take care of. So it was I was very glad that I could just throw that whole thing away. Because if it had been a real dish, that was just another thing for me to take care of. I didn't want that. You can offer to go to their house and clean up. You can offer to babysit. And in this chapter, I'm not going to touch on it here, obviously, but in the chapter, I also talk about things like touch, right? Like getting consent before you give hugs, especially when we're talking about little kids. I'm so big on consent with little kids. Until this is a child that you are sure you can touch, you need to be getting permission before you just walk up to kids and giving them hugs and picking them up and swinging them around and stuff like that. Consent. I talk about this, dealing with sex life issues. And then I even talk about, this book came out a year ago. So I was even talking about supporting people with social distancing. So the tip number 10 is, like I said, it's geared towards those who are doing the supporting. So the way that the book ends is this last little piece right here. You can make it. This is your new normal. It will get better. You will make it through this. You will survive. You must survive. This is your new normal. And this was sort of like these are the sorts of things that I had to keep saying to myself over and over and over again. Much as I hate it, it's my normal. This is my normal. And that's the thing about the acceptance stage. I meant to touch on this earlier, but I didn't. The thing about the acceptance stage, it's not an end goal. The way Kubler-Ross puts it is, it's about incorporating that person into your life in a new way, right? So you've been used to that person being there every day. You've been used to being able to call that person. You've been used to waking up with that person. You've been used to, whatever. Well, you can't do that anymore. But how can you have that person in your life still, or have that person in your memory or whatever? How can that person still be a part of your world, but in a new way? And that's what the acceptance is about. And so, for me, I have rituals. I have little things that I do. I take flowers to his grave on a regular, not a regular basis. I have certain times of the year that I say, okay, they go on this time, this time, this time. And then if I can go in between times, I will. Just have my sorts of little things that I've done over the past couple of years to try to stay connected to his memory, but also be able to move forward with my life. I talk about him. I talk about him openly with everybody, and I've been able to kind of keep him present with me without feeling like I have to like completely block him out. I can't think about him, can't talk about him anymore. So that's what acceptance is about. It's not necessarily that it's not that I'm okay with him no longer being here. I'm never going to be okay that he's gone. But I've found a new way to move forward and to be okay. I found a new way to find a way to be okay. So that's what the acceptance stage is about. And that's what this sort of, you'll survive, you can make it. This is the new normal, but you can do it. You can do it. You have to do it. You got people that you got to do it for. You got to do it for yourself. And so that concludes my talk.
Thank you, Candace. You shared some really great tips in there that I'm sure people will return to again and again. I often hear from folks who are not believers and they lose a loved one. And even though the loved one maybe wasn't religious, the family members are deeply religious. And so they actually host a very, very religious funeral, and often at religious funerals, I mean, for Christian ones, the pastor will make a real point of telling people, preaching at them, and it just can be really offensive when you're also in mourning and you don't think that it's an opportunity, shouldn't be an opportunity to hijack this very sad event. I wonder if you have experience with that, or if you have any ideas for people who, who are going through that then, and they know they're going to have to sit through a very religious experience there.
Absolutely. Two things. One is just, as a non-believer myself, it can be, I've been sitting in funerals myself where I became really angry, because I'm thinking, why would you sit up here and say these things to the people, right? Why would you sit up here and talk about heaven and hell, or talk about, try to convince us, that this person was a good Christian, when I know this person was just out here in the streets with me, And so, and one of the things, like with my high school sweetheart, I knew he was not a non-believer, but he had these questions about, I would say that he did not really believe that Jesus was the Son of God, but he believed in a God. He was more like, that's a God, but I don't believe in white Jesus. He was more like that. And so it was kind of hard being in the funeral, and everybody was talking about, oh, he was such a good Christian man. And, he came to church and he did. And I'm like, he came to church like 3 times a year. Like, y'all stop playing. Like, I know this man. He was none of these things that you all are saying. So in the book, I talk actually about dealing with people who, like, in situations like that, where one, either the person was a non-believer, but nobody else does. Maybe the person was a non-believer. Other people know, but they're trying to ignore it now because the person's deceased. I think about, for example, somebody I know who when she died, she was a lesbian, and we were so happy that her mother buried her in a suit, because we just knew that somebody was going to convince her mother to put her in a dress. But the way that they preached made it sound like she was somebody that she wasn't. And so that kind of left a bad taste in a lot of the family members' mouths, because it was like, we know her, this is not how she is. But at the same time, we have to learn how to sort of, one of the things I talk about in the book is that everybody is sort of trying to struggle through this process and struggling to try to find a way to make it make sense for them. And so what I say is, as long as your mourning process is not attacking my mourning process, as long as you're not coming to me and saying, see, Candace, this is why you need to be believing in heaven, and this is why you need to be da-da-da. As long as you're not coming to me and attacking my mourning process, I'm not going to attack your mourning process. If you need to believe that he or she is in heaven, or you need to tell yourself that they were a good Christian, or whatever you need to do to help yourself get through this unspeakable pain, fine. I'm not going to take that from you, but don't bring it to me. And so I do say in the book, let people mourn however they want to mourn. Don't jump down their backs. Don't jump down their throats. But at the same time, defend yourself. if somebody is coming to you, trying to tell you, see, this is why you should be believing this way because life is short. You never know. Then, of course, yes, I would speak up and say, don't look, I'm going through too much right now. Don't come at me with this. I'm not trying to hear it right now.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, I'm going to leave you alone. I'm going to let you mourn the way you want to mourn.
Mm-hmm.
Leave me alone. I'll leave you alone.
Right. Yeah. So even maintaining some boundaries, even in the midst of our grief, because as you mentioned, we are extremely vulnerable when we're grieving. There's almost nothing that will hit us that hard as the death of a loved one. It just really can knock us off kilter. I like that you encourage non-believers to be patient with mourners who are believers. They're trying to comfort themselves and each other with their belief system. That's what they have available to them. And we don't all see things the same way, but then you mentioned we can maintain our boundaries. I think that's really important. I wonder if you have any ritual or anything when you think about letting go of someone or saying goodbye to your beloved that you lost just a few years ago. Any rituals that were helpful for you or that you have recommended to other people in their grief that might be helpful?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, if you know me, I'm a hiker. So, my primary ritual was getting outside. And actually, to be honest with you, I stopped hiking. I stopped going outside. I mean, I was in the despair of if I was not at work, I was in the bed. If I wasn't in the bed, I was laying on the couch under a blanket, letting the TV watch me. I didn't do anything. And finally, after maybe 6, because I normally will hike every week. I go hiking somewhere every Sunday. I try to. And so at that time, I realized it had been maybe a month and a half and I had not been out. And I know he used to be so proud of me because I did these 14,000 foot mountains. And, I'm a, little old Black girl, not afraid to go up in the mountains of North Carolina all alone and lose myself in the woods. And, and he used to always be like, you're crazy. How do you do this stuff by yourself? And I'm like, it's nature. What do you mean? It's not scary. It's just bears and mountain lions. And so that was the one thing that I had to do was to get back outside, was spending that time outside. And so that's why I said that chapter about being in nature, it really is my favorite chapter. And not just my personal belief about it, but again, like I said, when you read the research, there really is a lot of research that talks about how important and how good it is to get outside when it comes to dealing with stressful situations. I do talk about in the book, again, like I said, one of the tips is doing things in their honor. So I do talk about different types of things that you might be interested, that you might do. You might plant some flowers. A friend of mine, actually the woman who send me cards all the time, she had a lover who died. I don't know, gosh, now it's probably been 15 years now. At the time that she told me it had been 10 years. So it's probably been 15 years now. And she planted his favorite flowers in her yard. And so now 15 years later, these flowers are still in her garden. They're still there. And so she still takes good care of them, and it's like, of course she's fine, but she still has these flowers. She still visits his grave 15 years later, and so those are the types of things I tell people, find what makes you feel comfortable, what makes you feel comforted. Is it to, just have a picture of the person if that's too painful? Is it plant some of that person's favorite flowers if that's too painful? Is it, go out once a month and eat out at their favorite restaurant as a tribute to them? Whatever you can think of can be a ritual. Anything can be a ritual. Sitting on the floor and drinking a cup of tea in honor of that person can be a ritual.
Yes. Oh, yes. I love that. in my community, we have a memorial bench program. So you can contact the city and then purchase a bench, which will have a plaque with their name on it and a quote of theirs. And then it's out in nature, as you were saying. And so we do have a question here. Any advice on talking to religious people who are also grieving the death of the same person? I had a best friend who committed suicide, and his dad occasionally texts me about how worried he is about his son's soul. I think I do okay, but I still feel very unsure how much to be honest with my non-beliefs. And my friend actually was the first step of my deconstruction from my faith in God.
So I would say the first thing that I would do is just kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Like, just let the person know that you hear them and you hear what they're saying, because what they're really saying is that they're saying they're worried about their soul, but they're really like just thinking about the person. They're really like wanting the best for the person, right? They're really wishing that the best for this person they could have the best at all times in life and even in the afterlife. And so, maybe part of what you can sort of reflect back to the person that you're talking to, as opposed to talking about your friend, talk to the friend's father of like, I hear you, I hear your pain, I see your pain, I see that you're worried about, you want the best for him. You've always wanted the best for him. That's a great thing for a dad. You were such a great dad. I don't know if they really were, but you can find something positive to say to that person, and making it about that person and supporting that person and helping them feel like you can do this, you can make it, you can do this, and just staying away from religion altogether, staying away from if you don't have to, you can always, if they say soul, you can always just come back to I hear what you're saying. Well, what's something you can do to take care of yourself today to feel better? What's something and then just always kind of pivot the conversation back to the person, to the person. I hear what you're saying about the soul. I know. But so what can you do today? I hear you really worried. You want to make sure that the best is, that they always have the best. So what are you doing today to take care of yourself? What have you done lately to take care of yourself? Right. That's my favorite question for people is what have you done to take care of yourself lately?
Yes. I think you're exactly right. And so drawing them back to the present as well, and letting them know that you just validating their pain and how much they're missing that person. And definitely religious people suffer a lot when it comes to death because of the beliefs that they have. And it can really it can short circuit the grieving process sometimes if the other person was a believer and then they're told, well, we don't grieve as the world grieves, so you can't be sad because that person's Jesus. But even worse almost if the person wasn't a believer and then they're told the person is suffering and burning in hell. So religious people, I think, really do suffer. Everyone suffers in grief, but it can be very complicated.
It can be, it's different. It's definitely different. It would definitely be very different.
It's different. We do have another question here. Do you have any resources for secular funeral music? I've been thinking about heading that direction as a composer musician, as it seems like an unmet need.
Let me write that down. Secular what?
Secular funeral music.
Secular.
Because so often the only thing that's played are hymns and, Amazing Grace and all that kind of stuff. But if we're not believers, we don't really want that played at our service.
Yeah, so I don't know of any off the top of my head. I would say my advice, I know for me personally, what I've told my friends and family is play my favorite music. Exactly. Like, just play my favorite songs. Like, it don't have to be anything special. my girlfriend is from New Orleans, and there's this extremely like ratchet, like booty shaking song that apparently they do at funerals in New Orleans on a regular basis.
Wow.
And so she's like, if y'all don't dance, do this like ratchet booty dance at my funeral, I'm gonna be mad. And so I'm like, I guess that's what y'all do in New Orleans, okay? And so that's what I'm saying, like, play my favorite music. Play something cool, calm and relaxing. Play some classical music. Play whatever feels good. Yeah. But on that note, I know Dan Barker is working on a music project, and I don't want to say too much because I don't know how much he has said, but I know he's working on a music project that might be quite interesting. So I'm going to take this idea back to him.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed learning from you today. Thanks for coming back and sharing these tips. I hope everybody rushes out and buys your book because it sounds really good. Really
I think it's pretty good.
Awesome. Okay, everybody. Well, it's hard to believe. We're down to our very last speaker now. So we're going to take a 15-minute break. And when we come back, I will have the highly esteemed and greatly beloved Dr. Marlene Winnell. She will be closing out the conference on religious trauma this year. So we're taking a little break, head into the exhibit hall and check out our exhibitors there. And we'll see you again soon for our final session.